Knoxville. Got my 5-year professional Bachelor of Architecture there. While I was attending there, I had the great honor to receive the Gensler Diversity Scholarship, which came with a scholarship and internship opportunity. I chose the Chicago office to come and intern and fell in love with it. Um, and was able to come back after I graduated and return full time. Kind of in between that time, that really introduced me to NOMA. Myself and a couple of my friends back in school, we restarted the NOMA's chapter back at the University of Tennessee. Glad to see that still going strong, and they're having a lot of success there. I came up and joined the INOMA executive board. I was the historian. Now I'm the university liaison. I'm also on the ACE Chicago Associates Board. Um, so actually, my first involvement with AIS was in 2014 when the AIS Forum was in Nashville. University of Tennessee was the host chapter, so got to volunteer and be involved with AIS in that. I am currently an associate at Gensler Chicago, and I recently received my architecture license as well. So I just finished the path. I actually got my certificate this morning.
Yay. I will audibly cheer and then jump in for my introduction. Hi, everyone. I am Imani Day. I live in Detroit. I am an architect with Gensler Detroit. I am also a Cornellian, class of 2011, Go Big Red. My involvement with AIA and NOMA, AIAS and NOMA on campus was likely very, I had memberships, but I was not very active. So I'm glad to see people who are. But then after, as a professional, I am on the AIA Detroit board as a Detroit director, and I have had various NOMA Detroit roles, and now on the national board as a part of the empowerment initiative under Jason Pugh. And so I did get very involved after school, and what I think is kind of interesting about all of that is when I started working after school, I didn't really have a clear path on what to do exactly with my career or relate back to equitable practices or licensure or any of these topics that I now kind of feel a lot more knowledgeable about. So I am now, as I mentioned with Gensler, working on some exciting, fun projects in the world of equity and inclusion, and I got licensed in June of 2019. So fairly recent, a little ways out, but there.
I'll jump in. My name is Jennifer Matthews. I am a 2013 graduate of Tuskegee University and a 2019-20 graduate of SCAD from the Business Design and Arts Leadership Program, which is known as Creative Business Leadership now. I had a lot of AIS and NOMA involvement at Tuskegee. I served as the chapter president there and also helped out a lot with our NOMA chapter. During my 5th year, I was elected 2013-2014 National Vice President of the American Institute of Architecture Students. So a former officer who's worked with a lot of the AIS spaces that you see here. I presented at the NOMA conference that year on a leadership kind of basis, just talking to students about leadership and involvement in student organizations. And kind of since then, I've remained involved by continuing to host seminars when I can at AIS conferences, and even hosted and created a NOMA symposium through the DC NOMA chapter some time ago. And we had about 75 students from like the DMV area that came to Smith Group, and we had a whole day of events planned for them. So I've kind of continued to remain involved and reach out to students, host professional development programs for students, and it kind of spiraled into this creative professional development platform called Creatives XP that I run from time to time and host seminars for from time to time. What I'm doing now, I work for Sherlock Smith and Adams, which is a healthcare based firm out of Montgomery, Alabama, which is where I'm from. But I'm a full-time remote employee working out of Virginia at the moment. So we do a lot of healthcare projects for military bases, government projects, medical and dental veterinary medicine clinics. So I do a lot of that. And healthcare has pretty much followed me since I graduated. So healthcare specialization is kind of my thing and what I've always done since graduating. I dabbled in offices, educational workshop facilities as well. And I am currently halfway through the licensure process, having 3 tests left. So that is where I stand with it, and I'm still chugging along.
I'll go next. My name is Reinu, and I graduated from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo back in June. And my involvement with AIS, I had a couple different roles, but I restarted the Freedom by Design chapter at my university. And then I was also on the National Equity and Diversity Task Force with Aaron as the chair of the first year. And then my last year of college, I was the chair for the same task force. And I was also a NCARB student licensing advisor for like the AIS at my school. So with what I'm doing right now, since I graduated in June into the pandemic, my plans sort of fell apart. And I decided to start my master's. I was originally supposed to be working for Lend-Lease in San Francisco on their design build team. But right now I'm doing a master's through the University of Illinois in civil engineering with a concentration in construction management. And then I took my first ARE at the end of last year. So I've passed 1 of the exams so far. And I'm actually interning with Lend-Lease Chicago so that I can keep chipping away at the AXP hours and gain more experience while I wait for my full-time position to start.
Thanks to all our panelists. Erin is back, so I'll give it off to her for the first question.
Hi, thanks so much. It wouldn't be a webinar without technical difficulties. So I just want to take a moment to say hi and welcome everyone. I am Erin Conti. I am the current president of the AIS, and I am so grateful to have all of our wonderful panelists today and to be co-moderating this panel with Leslie. And I will just kick it off with our first question. So a question for all of you, and you might have kind of answered this within your intros, but maybe you can elaborate a bit, is why did you decide to pursue licensure and what motivated you?
I guess I could jump in there. When I graduated, I guess I went to architecture school to become an architect, and I selected schools based on my ability to test after. I was kind of like in the thick of things in high school. But soon after I graduated, there was a, between NOMA and just the Black female licensed architects that I knew, there was an immediate like, actually, you don't even have a choice in this. And so you must go through the process. There were probably, when I started, still very low 400s, maybe. It was in 2012, so or maybe 2013. So it was one of those things that was a numbers game that was just like, okay, there's just not enough of us. If I really am going to dig my heels into this profession, I have to be a part of that number. My idols were a part of that number, the early numbers, and I just always felt kind of like, there's no other option here. You have to do it. And that was what motivated me the entire time, was a group of actually all professionals in all of my positions at each firm that I worked for. I learned a lot by studying, but then also I just always wanted to be able to say that I was an architect. And so there's so many facets to it, but at the end of the day, we're at a little over 500 now licensed Black female architects. And so it's just not, I don't think that the numbers, I think the numbers speak for themselves. Let's put it that way.
Just to follow up with Delani, similar, there's always that kind of underlying, you don't have a choice, but at the same time, there's not enough representation within the Black female kind of community as architects. So it wasn't really a if, but a when. And just kind of, jumping in and figuring out, the steps and the like how I was going to personally approach it. So I decided to, try to get my footing in for the now AXP, formerly IDP hours, and just trying to, chip away at it as best as I could and be as like aggressive as I could with those hours, just in case for any reason, like I decided to possibly work in a kind of an alternative path, coming from AIS and kind of being used to that nonprofit world and the collateral world and what alternative careers look like. Like one of the main things I wanted to do was try to get done with those hours, so I could have that flexibility and kind of freedom to potentially do other things. But along the way, I stuck with traditional practice and enjoyed it. So I continued on that path, eventually jumped into the license process, and just been, going ever since then. But like Amani said, it's 500s now that there's not enough, and you're always bumping into people that say, I've never met a Black female architect, and it's like I want to get past that architecture intern or designer like title, or this at this point it's like, all right, when is this rain cloud gonna pass? So that's where I am.
So going off of what Jennifer said about the AXP hours, I think I've sort of used the process to licensure as a way to motivate myself to get as many internships as I could and as many different types of experiences as I could throughout college. So I've done internships at like more traditional architecture firms, but I've also worked at an architecture firm abroad in India, as well as with different nonprofits. So I think for me, it was going to architecture school, the goal was to become an architect. And I didn't even really realize that till about like the end of first year that, oh, you're not an architect unless you get licensed. So it was never really oh, should I get licensed? It was, okay, how do I incorporate this process of licensure into both like my academic goals, but also moving forward after that. And I do long-term want to go into nonprofit work and start my own sort of social enterprise. So for that, I want to be a licensed architect so that I have more flexibility in the type of work I want to do and not need to be constrained by working under someone that's licensed.
Yeah, I think I would say my path is kind of similar to Renew. It's the being in ACE in high school. Joseph Cole was my mentor, and he was, he went to University of Tennessee. He worked against her for a little bit. So I think about kind of following his footsteps a little bit, but he was very adamant about, go to an accredited school, get your license, so that way you can do the work that you want to do, that you can design the type of projects that you that you want. And so, getting a license and having that flexibility is very important. And it's also about representation as well. It's one of the great things that I love about the NOMA organization, is that we really are just trying to push for diversity in design, and having more minorities that are licensed will help with that, will help with a lot of the social issues that we have in this country, because design can create change. So in order to be a part of that change, in my opinion, you have to have that accreditation and that power in order to do so.
Absolutely. So I do want to focus a question to Jennifer, Renew, and Mustafa. So I want you guys to describe your experience thus far. What difficulties or victories have you encountered during this process?
So for me, back in around November, I just decided to sign up for 3 exams, and I didn't really study a ton because I just sort of scheduled them in between midterms and finals. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take the 3 exams. So I did practice management, project management, and construction and evaluation. So I studied a little bit, but definitely not a ton. But it sort of coincided with everything that I was learning in my master's program. And my goal was to just sort of pass 1 out of those 3 exams. And I managed to pass my first one. So I passed practice management, which was the first one I took. But I think it was definitely a good motivator for me to actually start studying, to have passed 1 exam. I was like, okay, now there's a clock on my NCARB account saying that this will expire at some point. And also, I think testing with COVID, 2 of my exams sort of just got like canceled and like rescheduled months later. So then I had to like go through the process of rescheduling it and things like that. So there's definitely been a lot of issues because of COVID in general, and also having to sit in like a stuffy room wearing a mask for many, many hours is not great, but I've sort of gotten used to it now because I did it 3 times. But I think just like getting the ball rolling on it was probably the biggest hurdle for me.
I'd say similar. You know, it's been a road. I'd say when I first started the AREs, I had this like big goal in mind. I'm going to start the AREs. I'm going to be licensed by 30. I'm going to have a grad degree by 30, maybe a house and maybe this and this and this, you know, all, I had this like laundry list of everything that was going to happen by the time I was 30. So far, so good. But I played reverse psychology on myself, kind of similar. And I started in 4.0. I took schematic design first. So that was like my first pass. And I was like, you know what? I'm knee deep in it now. I can't turn around. And, you know, just seeing, I think that first pass, it mentally, it keeps you going versus, you know, not having a pass under your belt. You know, there's a lot of room for self-doubt and a lot of just mental games at that point where you have to really get past it. So I think the biggest thing for me in terms of like victories is like, you know, getting a win under my belt, continuing to push on. The difficulties for sure was when I finally got into like the construction doc and the PPP sections of 4.0. I spun my wheels, something serious, because those tests gave me all kinds of headaches. And I finally passed construction documents, and I missed PPP by the vignette only. And that was right before 5.0 came around, and I didn't get that pass to transition and get that credit for 5.0. So, you know, stepping into 5.0, I tackled practice management, project management first, and, you know, had a bumpy road trying to transition, of course, but I got those 2 under my belt. So at that point, it's like, okay, I'm halfway and just, you know, keep going. But now with the pandemic, I finished my degree in the spring of last year. And I kind of took that time to finish that degree. So I stepped away from the AREs for a bit. And this past fall was the first time I stepped into a test center. And with that mentality that I hadn't had for a while, I kind of took turns between grad classes and the ARE when I could. So this was the first time I stepped into a test center where the ARE was my primary focus. And just like the pandemic and the mask and, you know, being told by a test center, like, if you pull your mask down, we might be obligated to take you out of the test room. And, you know, you can't do these things. You can't do these things on top of already all the things you have to account for when you go into a test center. But it was almost a level of anxiety there, dealing with COVID and testing in a room full of people with masks on the entire, you know, 4 or 5 hours. So that kind of became a level of anxiety that I'm still working on, along with some test anxiety too. So I think that's like my current kind of difficulty of trying to work through is like, how do I mentally get myself together to work through this COVID situation and continue testing for like the next 5 months or so, and try to tackle it hard.
Kudos to you guys for, first of all, doing testing and grad school at the same time. That is, I cannot imagine, you know, it's already a struggle, working a full-time job. And of course you have long hours, you know, at times, and then doing studying after that. That's definitely the biggest difficulty for me is, you know, trying to balance that, when it was having late nights or a project deadline that, when you schedule an exam, you don't know that you're going to be working till midnight, 1 o'clock, but just balancing those along with some of the other extracurriculars that I'm doing as well. It was kind of like, okay, what am I doing? What am I doing to myself? But that balance, I think, actually gave me a little bit more of a structure and a routine, which kind of pushed myself into, building a schedule around, studying and making sure that people at work are both understanding and, are aware that I am testing. So that was definitely a good victory for me, is having people and support and understanding. So that way, say, hey, I can't, work late tonight. I have to study for this exam, and then being understanding. And myself, I've been pretty blessed and lucky through this process to get through it as young as I am, because that was a big thing coming into NOMA. It was like, okay, now start right now. After I graduated, I think it was the first mid-year summit for iNOMA, and Darren Triplett and Oz were just like, hey, start studying now, start taking these tests now, and get them out of the way. And that was probably that's the best advice that I'd gotten so far. So it is, having that support structure and having that balance were huge victories for me.
Yeah, I think that's so great to touch on, and I think would lead great into another question. And I know we talk about it within the AIS, and I'm sure NOMA does as well all the time, the importance of work-life balance in architecture school, your work-studio balance, let alone, as you said, doing grad school and testing, and we're in a pandemic. A lot of things have changed. So if would love to ask you all to talk a bit about how you've kind of worked through that work-life balance and that studying balance, and just how have you done it all? How did you do this?
So kind of what I was saying is like, sorry, just schedule. That's my big thing. It's just, try and really schedule things out and get a support structure underneath you that can, help you through that process. Get study groups together, be, communicate and exchange resources with, other test takers, et cetera. Sorry, Mike.
Oh no, I think first, Mustafa is the authority on this, because he moved very, much faster than I did through my exams. And it was kind of because of a work-life balance problem where I was essentially just too active in my office, outside of my office, and trying to test at the same time. So again, kudos to you guys who are in school doing anything outside of just working like your 9 to 5, because I was simply too active and had to kind of start to sacrifice certain things about my passions. That sounds bad, but like for instance, my NOMA Detroit role, I had to have that take a back seat. That AIA, anything that was like even the extracurriculars within Gensler, I just had to say no to a lot of things. And one of my mentors, Kim Dowdell, was like, you have to shut your social life down. And in fact, I actually disagree with that a little bit now, because you do need an outlet that you need to release into. Like you should not be in like studying prison. But I do think prioritizing is really important. Some of your leadership roles, you've got to figure out whether getting licensed is more important than you having a voice on your local board of something, or because it's hard to start to manage all of the responsibilities and get it done. And I've seen people do it, but it's a much more painful process, and it just works against you, I think, in a lot of ways. So
I think the key word there is balance. And that's exactly what it has to come down to. If you understand that the exam period of your life is a very concentrated time, ideally, then you focus on that, and you have a couple of other things that you can do as well. I firmly believe you have to have an outlet. You need 9 architect friends, like for real. Like that's a real thing. I remember telling people that in school, if all of your friends only wear black clothes and drink coffee, then you got terrible college life. That's very terrible. And it's something that you should do as a professional as well. And I think that once you're able to strike that balance, you can be much more focused. If you know, all you do is study and go to work, then oftentimes you have this level of anxiety that bleeds into your exam taking and it bleeds into your work. And it's not healthy at all. If you go on the other side, you just kick it and kick it hard, and then you study 1 hour a week, then the ramifications of that decision will show up as well. And so you really do have to strike a balance. Erin, I think we'll definitely go to you. What's funny now is that you tell people to put questions in the chat, and at first there were none, and now there's like 36. So, you know, that's kind of how that goes. But, you know, you're a professional, so I'm sure you're managing that very well.
Yes, we're definitely keeping track of everyone's questions. So keep them coming. We're really excited about the questions. I went into some of the answers myself. I do want to ask Amani this next question, kind of like on the other end, the other side after you're finished, kind of the best side, I guess. So when you became licensed, how did that affect your career? I want to know, like, did you get more opportunities and did you just feel a little bit more freer, I imagine?
You know, it's surprising. I thought that when I got done, I would like host a gala or something for myself. And I was just too exhausted to do any of it. But honestly, I think it depends kind of where you are in your career, and especially actually physically where you are too, because once I got licensed within the Gensler context, like Gensler pushes, or larger firms, I would say, probably push you to get licensed for your own professional development. It is important. It helps, you know, with your project work, all of that sort of stuff. But it's not like you're really stamping anything. And so you're really in it for yourself. You have to be in it for yourself. It's not for a promotion. It's not for anybody but you at this point. And so I'd say within the context of Detroit, one, just at base level, there are not a ton of Black architects in any cities, but in Detroit as well. Once you say I am a Black architect, people kind of flood in to say, we need you to do all of these things. Are there really interesting, fun, kind of smaller opportunities that I got outside of Gensler that were great? There were like young female-led startups that just needed a space downtown, or like they got into some really interesting comfortability. Like they just wanted to work with a Black woman. They were Black women. They wanted to work with Black women, or you know, you are able to work with different community groups because you are agile and hungry for work. Like I will say that definitely in terms of business development, it helps you, I think, because people want to hear that credential, and they want to, I mean, you can take them all the way through a documentation process. Like it's sort of an assumption that you can do certain things and you know certain things, even though you might have forgotten you're studying. But I think the realest moment for me is when I had to stamp my own drawings. And that's the biggest change I've felt. Like at all of my jobs, yes, you have a ton of responsibility, but it's someone else's license and insurance. And so when you get your license and you're able to actually perform and take the project all the way through from design to documentation, it just gets really real and it feels like a different responsibility. And so I think it is really about, sure, maybe you get like a slight raise. I've never really heard of anyone getting a massive raise because they got licensed, or an immediate promotion because they got licensed. I think those things come from actually a lot of things aside from licensure. But I will say that my experience in my career did change a lot. It shifted my focus on which communities I want to serve independently. And then within Gensler, what can I bring to the firm? What I have to play with that balance pretty specifically, but I think overall the relief is more than I can say. But then honestly, you fill your studying time with other busy things. I am no less busy or stressed out. And so, but hope is alive, everyone. Hope is still alive.
That is so valid. I mean, just finishing the licensure last December, I've kind of swapped between tech workplace and ground up office buildings and some data center projects. And so once I got my license, it happened to coincide with the next phase of a project I've been working on for a couple of years to come online. And they were just like, okay, well, do you want to be the project architect for this next phase? You know, so that was a very very quick switch over. It's a project that I've been worked with, the client worked with for multiple years, but being able to own, an entire phase of a project, which, is pretty exciting. Like, yes, like Imani mentioned, we're not the one doing the stamping, but, we're leading the coordination, we're leading all the meetings, we're making sure that what's in the set, what needs to be in the set is there. So there's a lot more responsibility, that comes with that, because it's, even though, like Imani said, we don't know everything. You may be licensed, but there are still people who are unlicensed with more years of experience that can still, run a project, better than you, just because of the experience. And so just having that, having the license under your belt is still another level of like responsibility, and saying, okay, well, I can still get this done, but I will be reaching out to other people for assistance.
Yeah, I think it's also just like there's an element of trust within your teams and in your clients that you kind of get, just because hopefully everybody on this call knows, if you got through your licensure exams, you have to have read and you have to know certain things. So I think your team has a little bit more trust and just a little bit more belief that you can handle certain technical parts of the project. And so I think that also helps just in terms of, in a pandemic, the flexibility for you changes a lot as well, just because if you're thinking through staffing, if I might have previously been more conceptual or like at the front end of a project, now I can absolutely be staffed as something more technical or documentation focused, just because I'm capable for sure. And I think the growth opportunities change quite a bit once you have that under your belt. But in the process of getting licensed, you also have to ask for those opportunities, and it builds your skills anyway. So you build the trust within your teams, and then are able to kind of relay it back to the client as well, just when you're speaking and presenting.
Yeah, no, it sounds like so much responsibility and just so much that you don't really know, before you're on the other side of it. And Imani, you started to touch on something in terms of just, trust within your team and being able to ask questions to gain different experience. That is a question I had, and I've seen it in the chat as well. How, for your AXP hours, are there any experience categories, or were there when you were in the process of getting your license, that were tougher to earn hours in? And what is the best way to go about talking to your employer about filling those gaps in your experience to get all those hours?
I can jump in. It's been some time since I've looked at the AXP format and I submitted my last hours. But I'd say I was fortunate enough to be at a firm at the time where they were okay and they were ready to have some younger staff step up and be a part of the entire design process. I'd say after planning a couple of events and them kind of seeing skill sets and things, they were kind of excited that I wanted to try to take on some smaller projects by myself to kind of get into kind of that project management role, even as like a person that was only like, 3 or 4 years out of school, like maybe more so 3 years out of school. So by being kind of put in front of a small project where I could see it from beginning to end, it was a lot easier to get a lot of those hours for different phases, whether it was just talking to clients or trying to understand like the contract or doing CA. Because the project was small enough where I could run with it, but also have like a architect advising me if I needed help as well. So I think it's really important to be in a place, in a firm that really supports and gives you the opportunities that you really want. Even now at my firm, they have a group of young professionals, and they really want to train those young professionals to become, project architects and project managers one day. So right now I'm helping out under a licensed architect, but I'm also serving as a project architect on another project whereas I could still ask architects in the office questions if I need to. So I'm kind of getting both of those roles where I'm leading one, but I'm learning from the other so I could apply to this other project. So it's been kind of well-rounded for me. And I've been really fortunate to be in firms that, they really give you those opportunities.
Going off of that, I feel like in almost every interview I've had, I just sort of tell them that I'm like working towards becoming licensed, and these are like the hours that I have completed so far. And if there's flexibility to sort of do different types of tasks to get hours where I need. And everyone has always been super willing to sort of let me switch from different tasks so that I get experience across all of the categories. And I think for construction and evaluation, in a couple of my internships, I was able to just specifically ask if I could go see a construction site when the architect visits. And even with my current internship, it's with a construction company slash developer, but I told my manager that I like did not pass the construction evaluation exam, and she was like, "Oh, let's make sure you're able to get onto site so you're like more able to see what's going on and have more experience than just trying to learn this from like the study material." So I think just asking for whichever hours I want has been the most effective way to get hours across the different categories.
Erin, let me jump in here really quickly. I think what you've heard conclusively from everyone is the opportunity for you to get that hours. You have to be very intentional, right? When you get on a good job, any good job is going to make sure you get your hours and get it as fast as possible. They'll assign you a mentor, a supervisor, whatever it's called at your firm, and they'll walk with you monthly or bi-monthly to make sure you get your hours. They'll tell you it's an opportunity for you to grow and progress. Also, we can charge a whole lot more. Let's just keep it 100. I think this is very nice. We're having a cute little meeting right here. But the fact of the matter is, unlicensed Mustafa was a lot cheaper than licensed Mustafa. You know what I'm saying? And now that we got licensed Mustafa, his billable rate went up. And so, this is a very nice meeting. We're going to get a real talk about this. I could charge a lot more for a licensed Mustafa. And as a result of that, I encourage everybody to also know your worth, right? And so when you become licensed, they give you a little letter, and everybody at the firm might give you a cake or a party. Well, there need to be some cash on the back end. There usually is some bonus structure need to be built into there, because you are a valuable asset as a licensed architect at any firm. And quite frankly, if you are a woman of color, you are a unicorn. And so you should definitely get some kind of appreciation and love. And so I just want to make sure that point is not lost while we're having this other kind of, how would the hours thing? I mean, these other points need to be known. So just had to make that clear.
Absolutely. I think that's a super important point to talk about. It's just how important it is to just be licensed in general, and how much that can raise your value. I actually want to put the next question to Antoine, specifically about NOMA's 50/50 challenge and the 20/30 challenge, to just start talking about the opportunities and the resources out there that exist, and to make sure that more people that we need get licensed.
Great. No, I appreciate it. The 55/50 challenge is this year's, we're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Nationalization of Minority Architects. The third weekend of October, we will be in sunny Detroit, and looking forward to that. But we put a self-challenge. We want to see 50 brand new Black architects this year, right? And we want to make that happen. We literally just solidified a relationship with Black Spectacles maybe a month ago, where they are offering a deep discount to paid NOMAS members for all those study materials through Black Spectacles. You can contact Tiffany Brown, our new executive director, or any of the board members, and we can give you more details on that. But we really want to see people get licensed. We also are very aware, and you heard it from some of the other panelists, about some of the challenges that happened last year with the testing process. And so people are chomping at the bit to kind of get back into the exams. And so we're here to encourage and support. Some of you may be aware we have kind of a support on Facebook, a little accountability group that many people have participated in. It is called like the Accountability Support Group. It had a different name years ago, but we decided to be more professional and now have a support group that's on Facebook as well. And then the other challenge, we are looking to ideally double the number of African-American architects by 2030. That was an initiative that was kind of established by Kim Dowdell and is now being maintained and worked through with our new president, Jason Pugh. As of, I think at the end of 2020, our numbers were still around, just for African-American architects, a little less than 2,700. And so the goal was to get to 5,000 by 2030. Now, obviously, you do the quick math, we need a whole bunch of folks to get registered real fast. And so there are a number of initiatives to help support that. And so that's something that, you know, the 50 by 50 is one, the relationship with Black Spectacles. But then additionally, and it's in the chat as well, NCARB has put together some things that ideally will address people on both ends of the spectrum. Some people may be aware of iPal, which allows you to begin sitting for your tests while you're still in school. That was not around when I was a kid, you know, so the ability to study and actually sit for your exams while you're still in school, I think is a great opportunity. And then additionally, this AXP portfolio, which allows individuals that either took a different tour or didn't necessarily start testing right after school, but have been in the industry for quite some time to substitute work, i.e. finished work or construction documents and those kinds of things in lieu of collecting, you know, all those thousands of hours. And so there are a number of initiatives that are at play that can address people at both sides of the spectrum. And I encourage everyone to try to avail themselves of those opportunities.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing all of those. And I hope everyone was writing that down and you definitely take advantage of all of those opportunities that are out there. I think this next question, and we can definitely get to the questions in the chat soon. I see there are so many. Keep them coming. Would like to ask all of you, and I think it kind of goes with this conversation, what changes would you like to see in how we think about licensure and how we talk about it? Like Antoine said, like we're being really real here. So anyone, if you want to start out.
I could start. I know that in my process of licensure, I felt honestly like kind of disconnected to a lot of the content just because my work is almost always focused in equity, communities of color, disproportionate effects of things like a pandemic or bankruptcy or whatever, right? Like the types of groups that I work with, yes, there are like very specific licensure code, specific things that I need to know. But it felt in some ways, I think to me, a little irresponsible that as a licensed architect, you're not required to know about certain histories of people, especially in places like Detroit. I feel like it should be a requirement of our licensure process to learn some of the really tough racial injustices that were a result of urban form and policy decisions that architects played a big role in. It feels kind of like you get to the end of this process and we let people kind of run free and practice in a city that has these like really strong charged histories. And I think it's really interesting just to see and to think about how you might weave something like that in. A lot of times I thought like, this isn't really what they're focused on, or like, this isn't what licensure is about. And actually just in my practice, that's what it's been about. It's like, I have a different credential and a service that I can provide to communities that may not always have, you know, they may not know a ton of architects that they feel comfortable working with, that they feel will respond to their needs in a way that is actually in their best interest. There's a lot of just kind of, I don't want to get into like a whole therapy session, but there's a lot there that just speaks to empathy, inclusion, a little bit softer information that we just don't work into the process really at all to me. So I would want to see some of that stuff worked in so that you, when you are licensed, you are informed about human beings and historical social issues, as well as like actual building issues.
That's a very good point. You know, like a lot of the things that are in, you know, the reading materials and the test, it's about the physical space. You know, they say, you know, to promote safety, healthy, you know, places, but it's all about building elements and distances and codes. But, you know, how can we start to integrate some of those, you know, more humanity that more humanitarian type of efforts into our studies. So like Imani said, knowing the history of how people are disenfranchised through architecture, knowing ways that you can build social equity through design, those are some of the elements that should be associated with the licensure process as well. And I think we'll see a lot of these changes come later down the line. I think with a lot of things it comes years too late. But I think we'll see some of those changes come down the line.
They're coming down the line, Mustafa. You are a prophet, good sir. I can tell you definitively, right now, NOMA leadership, we've been talking to ACSA for at least 2.5 years about some of these very same things and the educational paradigm. What they are actively looking at right now is an entire reshaping of the education for architecture. As we all know, I mean, you call it what it is, but it's still very Western centric, and it doesn't cover much of the things that Imani spoke to earlier. I'll have to give it to the leadership team, Erin and Leslie after, because ACSA is actually engaging with students and young professionals about this very thing, about how can we incorporate things like racial justice and other kinds of backgrounds and narratives and histories into the educational paradigm. And that's an active study that's going on right now that they want people to enlist in. I'm not smart enough and know how to put it in the chat, but I'll definitely make sure that we circulate it to everybody. But additionally, I can tell you conclusively that they are looking at, and this is right now, making very sharp recommendations to the 132 accredited schools about how education shall look. So it's not necessarily something that we'll all be able to benefit from, but many of the young people coming up after us, and hopefully some of them that are in school right now watching this, will be able to reap the benefits of. So that's on deck right now, sir.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. Just to add kind of a alternate thought to it, the inclusion of who's able to take the test and who has access to taking the AREs. I have friends, colleagues who are completely capable of tackling these exams, but they are often thinking about the bills that they have to pay, the families that they have to support. Fortunately enough, there are ARE scholarships that are out there. One that just got done accepting applications was the Desiree Cooper Scholarship that I was a recipient of, which is a great scholarship in memorial of one of our fallen architects, Black female architects. So, those scholarships are out there, but there are a lot of individuals who will not approach the exam because, $235 or whatever per exam is a lot. Failing, having to pay that all over again is a lot. If you have kids, that's a lot, and you have to, pick and choose what you may and may not be able to pay for. Even with this pandemic situation, if you've been laid off or whatever, you have to think about your bills as well. With the NCARB technicalities right now, we had just started the pandemic. Then knee deep into like the summer, it's announced that, NCARB is going to revamp the test. And not only do you go into the test center and have all these different protocols to follow now, but also they're introducing a whiteboard. They are changing the format of the test. There's less questions, but same amount of time. This summer, they're transitioning to a new host for the test. It's like on top of the pandemic, you have all these other things that they're now introducing. So, when you think you got a handle on it, all of a sudden here's a change. With all these conversations about the formatting and NCARB and the technicalities and who has access, there's a lot of conversations about, women in architecture, expecting moms in architecture, those who just had kids in architecture. And you go into the testing center, if you're expecting, what do you do if you have a bathroom break? Because now when you take your break, you can't go backwards in the exam. You can't see anything that you've done previously. If you have to breastfeed, that's a thing. Those are things that aren't accounted for right now when, expecting moms and new moms go into tests. Those are things that women have to think about. So just the overall inclusion of everybody who needs to, tackle these exams. Those are a lot of conversations that are happening, still need to happen. Just the access, the support systems, those types of things. So just throwing those things out there.
Thanks, guys, so much. This has been a great panel, and we're going to keep it going with some audience questions. So the first question is, how soon do you suggest we start to work and log our hours, as well as begin studying for the ARE, and what are some study strategies that worked for you?
So I was lucky to receive a lot of help from people or my friends that are already in the process, so they were able to give me a lot of resources that actually kind of backing up from that, think your firm, first of all, when you're choosing your firm, when you're about to graduate, make sure you choose a firm that is going to support you, not just mentally, but financially in this exam process. Gensler is one of the firms that they'll reimburse you when you pay for your exams. They give you a stipend every year for your study materials and things like that. That is a huge part of that, trying to balance working and studying and then trying to pay for it as well. That can be a huge issue. So find a firm that is, going to support you in that. But other than that, as far as the process of studying, I really, I went with putting the business exams in the beginning and then the more design, construction, or CDs exams toward the end, and split it up that way, so taking practice management, project management, construction evaluation first, getting those out of the way, and then moving on to PPD, PDD, and PA. It helps to group those exams together because it keeps your brain in the same mindset. And a lot of those materials really flow together. And I really, using Ballast, AHPP, and really those are resources that I was able to get from my firm. So that saved me a lot of money. And then using some of the cheaper options like ArchiPrep and Pluralsight, those enabled me to, spend not as much money on the study materials, but still get a lot of information and a lot of knowledge out of it.
I guess during my studying process, I kind of went through ebbs and flows of studying by myself and trying to find groups. And I think in the beginning, it was really, really hard to find a group that was like taking the same exam, didn't know the same things and could be, on the same page. And one year I went to a NOMA conference and went to one of the NCARB seminars or something like that. And there were about 3 or 4 women in the crowd who were asking the same questions about the same exams. And we all kind of like, just after we're just like, hey, do you happen to be doing the exact same thing as I am? And we were all in completely different cities. But we just became like a super group of accountability partners to be like, hey, when's your exam? Hey, which exam materials are you focusing on first? Like, how can we break down so that we can check in with each other about what we're learning, or, ask questions, or, what are you doing at your job? Are you asking your technical director this, blah, 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 blah. I was on this project and I saw that it was different from what I studied. And so I think it was just also just a support group for failures as well, like where you go and say, hey, this went really well, and everybody celebrates together, or hey, this didn't go well. And honestly, it is something where you need some motivation, you need some support, both just with studying and the content, but then also you need someone who, and it's not like your non-architecture friends are not going to get it. They don't understand that when I took it, there were 7 exams, and I transitioned. Now there's 6 exams. Not very many other professions have to go through that. You kind of need a little group of people who are just going to be like, me too, like I am struggling, or I am doing great, whatever. So that group of people, both just sort of sharing understandings of the material, being able to kind of freely ask questions in an annoying way because you have 100 questions probably, I think was my saving grace. And the people who pushed me to my last exam were just kind of like, no, we're really close. I know you're really tired and you're kind of beat down, but we are in this together, and we're all still in it together. It's kind of like a lifelong support group at this point. So
Great, thank you so much. I think it's so important to highlight having a support group. And there are, whether that's your colleagues or there are different groups. I know NOMA has a study group, a lot of ways you can get involved and find people who are going through the same things you are. Another question from the audience that would love to, I would love to know this one. Is there something that you wish you did or something you wish you knew looking back when you began studying for the AREs?
Go ahead, Jennifer. You go ahead.
I feel like there are many
Hard
things. I'm trying to think of like one quick kind of particular thing. I mean, you know, timeline is everything. Being on a consistent study schedule, I feel like has always been an obstacle for me. Being serious and more dedicated to, like Ahani said, like say no to certain extracurriculars. For a while, I was like a leadership busybody. I was either creating a new event or I was hosting a new event or, you know, those type of things. So there was always something going on. And then you get to a point where you just start saying no. It's like, I have to take a step back. I have to live under a rock and it's okay if I have to do these things for a while. So saying no a bit sooner probably is one lesson learned that I've had for sure. And just like that work-life balance of just taking that time and knowing that, you know, not every happy hour in DC has to be attended. It's okay to miss a couple of those social events and those things that your friends go to. And, you know, so I could go on with a laundry list of things, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Jennifer telling on herself she was in them streets heavy back in the day, so that's
You know, you got to have fun sometimes.
She was, you know, she mild and meek, but don't let it fool you. No, I'm kidding. I think that there's a couple things. I mean, I always, and I've said this numerous times, I encourage people, if you desire to quote unquote be a licensed architect, you should definitely start as soon as possible and kind of get out the way when you have, you know, quote less things around, right? But for all of us that took a different route, right? You know, you may have you know, got married, or you may have had relationships, or you may have had children, or you may have taken a different job that paid a whole lot better to be an architect, right? And then you know, after 10 years said, oh, damn it, I guess I'll be an architect anyway, right? I mean, it could be any number of things. And you still desire to do so. One of the things I do want to encourage, quote unquote, all of us is that you are not a less than, right? I think that's something that people go through, that this whole dichotomy of you know, good people and not so good people, right? I've had friends of mine that taken an exam and failed it, and they go into this spiraling black hole for 3 months, right? And a lot of head shaking on this one, right? I think that, you know, you are still a good person. You are of value if you failed an exam, right? So I think people need to understand that. It is hazing. I'm old enough to have gone through like 3 different versions of the damn ARE. So I've seen it all kinds. Like, we started on paper. How about that? There you go. But it's something that if you want to focus and do it, know that there are support services. You know, I've paid for people. I've paid for people's exams, right? So, you know, you saw in the chat, there's quite a few people said that there are angels out there. There are people that will help support you in that, either financially, socially, resources, whatever the case may be. So I definitely want people to know that, but also know that there are people working to widen the net, if you will, for people to be eligible to take it, right? And so I think that's something that I really want, you know, some of us seasoned professionals to take advantage of that opportunity. And I think there's as many ways as possible for us to get to the finish line.
I guess one thing that I would say is that when I started, first I started almost straight out of school, and I was somehow surrounded by people who were just kind of casually passing on every first try. It was like, just like clockwork, they kind of studied and they passed, and it was just kind of like something that I thought was absolutely going to happen for me. And it didn't happen for me. I passed my first exam, which actually I thought that I wish that I had known to take a harder exam first so your rolling clock doesn't start. But I think, and that's not advice, it's just my rolling clock did kind of become an issue at some point. And so I don't know, I really think that failure is progress. And a lot of times my first fail took me out for about 6 months because I was just like, this isn't for me, I'm never gonna get it. And I completely just took a hiatus from testing at all. And just coming to the other side of that and trying to start to prioritize like my mental health over maybe just the rigor of the exams. Failure is okay. And actually it's still, you're still learning a lot of things. You're still making a lot of progress. And I think there's so much pressure on us to actually just, you know, do it as quickly as we can, or we're going to do it in a year or whatever it is. It's like this whole, the pressure that we actually put on ourselves. And a lot of times the community will actually put it on you as well. It's like, keep testing all of these things. And you really have to prioritize your own schedule and your own way. There are, you know, recommended ways to do things, but it's just so different for everybody. And I would hate for somebody to give up because failure happened to a lot of us who maybe hadn't really failed like that before. And especially academically, like you might be a really strong person in any other academic setting and fail these exams. And so it just felt to me like actually at some point I was just like, it actually doesn't matter how many times I fail. Failure is kind of like now it's not it just didn't sting as bad. I was just kind of like, this sucks and I want to get done. But just learn to roll with the punches of failure because it's not a step backwards. It's still always going to be a step forward.
If I could just back that up a little bit, like failure can be a part and is a part of this process. And it's one thing that you have to get over mentally to just make it through this, unless you're, you know, one of those test takers and one of those people who can pass it on the first try every time. But, you know, it's a part of this process. And while you're doing that, like Amani said, like 6 months can go by. Like I've definitely been there. I've definitely done that for sure. And one lesson learned also is time does not wait for anybody. I mean, you're gonna keep aging, things are gonna keep happening, whether it's like you mentioned, like marriage or, you know, kids or whatever is coming. It's like being able to try to figure out mentally that balance and try to keep pushing no matter what has been a thing. So, you know, time is always gonna be there and it's gonna always keep moving. So it's just a matter of if you can tackle it the best way you can. Don't get bogged down by failure. Just keep pushing forward no matter what.
Yeah, and that's valid. I think just one of the biggest takeaways too there is your mental health. You know, don't if it is stressing you out, you know, taking these tests to where you can definitely tell that it's hurting you in your everyday work life, personal life. So take a break. You know, I took almost a year, I think over a year break after doing the first three, and just came back to it. You know, a little bit of it was like I need a mental break from this, and then work got busy and life came in, came in factor. But like definitely think about your mental health and your mental wellness. I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned last year. I heard a lot of people was kind of the same way, you know, protecting their own mental health. So definitely do, you know, bring that same mantra to these tests and these exams.
So on the topic of obstacles, which we've all encountered many, there's some questions specifically about those who tested it during the pandemic. So what are your opinions on taking the exams during this time? Are you able to connect the same way with study groups and things like that? So what's been like your experience as far as like in-person testing or online testing because of the pandemic?
Go ahead.
Someone had actually asked if I had taken the online version. So I scheduled my first like at-home version a month from now, but they have you can like go onto the NCARB like record and you can schedule a free sort of like setup sort of thing, so you can go through the process of them like checking your room and making sure you meet the requirements and stuff. So I did that and I thought it wasn't that bad. And also the last exam I took had the whiteboard on it, and I personally didn't feel like it was that cumbersome because the first two exams I took I had scratch paper for, and the third one there was a whiteboard. It was a bit odd, kind of like paint, but I think for the exams that I like, because I did construction evaluation, and so for that one it was mostly just that I had to do math, like which I would have written down on a piece of paper. So it wasn't too bad. I think I preferred the scratch paper, but it wasn't like an end all for me. But I think in terms of being able to study with other people, I think just since I have just graduated, I don't know too many people that are sort of working towards their licensing like exams already. And since I'm not working for an architecture firm, I don't have that sort of support of like study groups or access to study materials from that. But I've sort of been using the studying as a sort of motivator to have a full schedule still, because I think that has been a good way for me to deal with not being able to go outside and do things. So it's been a interesting coping mechanism for me.
Um, so I've taken one exam back in the fall during the pandemic. I'll kind of backtrack a little bit and try to keep this as high level, but 2020, everybody knows that 2020 was brutal. It was rough from the beginning to the end. And it started a little bit before the pandemic for me. I lost a friend in a car accident, and another friend was seriously injured. That was probably 2 months. It was January of last year. So I went through a phase where I felt like, this was a young person, a person who like had paid off student loan debt, who had just like reached this like point in life. And so, going into a pandemic, trying to get my mind together about, life is not promised, young, old, whatever, anybody can be affected, and you just have to live your life as much as possible. Family is extremely important. Spending as much time as you can with the people that you love is important. Like adding that and learning that, trying to, take in that life lesson was a thing for me. But also going into the pandemic of, me finishing my degree program, pushing through to get through that, to then go into the summer and feel like I needed a break, finally a first mental break. I jumped into my first pandemic test in the fall. So I think all that kind of added a little bit of a layer of anxiety to me taking the test, and also being in a testing room during COVID and a mask and trying to do all these things. I did test in person, and just trying to, make sure I could get through this thing and adapt and change and learn and, find this mental place where I could be okay and kind of push forward. I spent a lot of 2020 trying to just like mentally regain myself and just push forward. I think going into, the new testing now, I personally don't think I could do online proctor tests. There are glitches that happen with the ARE, but also, if I'm here, I'll clean, I'll do whatever on my little breaks, and I'll be distracted by whatever's going on, and I'll do work. It takes a lot of discipline, I feel like, to do an online proctor test, as well as just knowing that your systems are going to work. Internet can go out, whatever may have you. I'll continue to test in person just for that, like, dedicated. If my computer needs to be restarted, somebody's right there. They can handle it for me, and I'm going to do that whole thing. So the pandemic has been a serious factor for me. 2020 was a serious factor for me. And I think, just continuing to push through and try to get through these things. Like Mustafa said, take a mental break if you have to, by whatever means you do, but try to keep pushing forward. And, we're young, we're able to adapt and change and do what we got to do. But I think I've gone through like the gambit of all types of things in this past year. Not that nobody else hasn't, but trying to rebound after all that has been a lot. So we can talk pandemic all day.
Yeah, I think kind of touching off of what you mentioned as far as like dedicated spaces, for my first 3 exams, my study spot was the coffee shop across the street. That's where I was going either after work or on the weekends. And then when the pandemic hit, it's like, okay, well, we're always at our desk, couch, bed, and like on a cycle, and trying to find another space to, me, I gotta have a dedicated space. So it's like, okay, my dining room is my study spot, my computer desk is my work spot, living room, bed, adding like another element in there. So I think when you're going through your study process, and you'll start to realize, like, if you feel like you're getting burnt out, you got to find another space, find another spot to study, and always use that like as your study spot, because that's probably where you're going to feel the most productive. That's just one part that I want to touch base off of what Jennifer was saying.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. And I think also is a great example of there is no one answer. There's no right or wrong answer, and everyone's experience is different. And you may prefer testing from home, or you may prefer testing in person, and you really just have to know that for yourself and know what's going to be the best for you. Before we start to wrap up, I will ask one more question, and I think this one could be tied to studying for the ARE, but also just life in general within the pandemic right now. So I think it's a good one to end on. What gets you back on track to keep studying if you lose motivation or if life just gets in the way?
I'll throw it out there first. I guess I think my motivation is just, my family around me and knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere down there. And also the motivation of, taking the time to celebrate victories when they happen, to kind of balance yourself out and rewarding yourself for, getting in the testing room or passing a test, all those things. So just the motivation around me and having motivational people to keep me upbeat and keep going has been good.
Yeah, I think for me, it was seeing people pass and finish. That was my motivation to like get back into it. It's like, okay, all right, it's my turn, time to get back in there.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
specifically.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jennifer.
I was about to say specifically, like at this moment, like the cut scores for the exam changes were just released over the weekend. So to see, like Mustafa said, a lot of friends or some friends who've been testing get those pass scores, it ultimately motivated me to like get back on track and keep moving. And I went and bought like test seats, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do this. And I was looking at exam test dates today, so that right there is a different or a really good form of motivation.
I'll let Amani go and then I'll close.
I guess at some point I was in, I guess I wasn't testing, and there was a financial incentive from NCAR, which was helpful to me. But then also my study group, it was just like people seeing other people pass, but then also even if you're in a group of people who are just ready to start like gearing up to study again, you're like, okay, I'm not by myself. We can do this. I'm motivated. I think the energy of the group around you and the motivation from them is really like half the battle, and scheduling your exam is also half the battle. That'll kick you into gear, hopefully, if you schedule it soon enough. So, yeah.
I've often teased people that when you have a reimbursement schedule as opposed to someone paying for you on the front end, that'll get you lined up, right? Because you're not going to let your money be out there bad, right? So that'll give you inducement. Additionally, it does help, as Imani and Mustafa and others said, when you have peers and those that you've been kind of pulling together, that kind of helps you. That's why I fully encourage everyone to find that peer group with the pandemic exposed. And what Imani actually talked about earlier is your peer group could be in entirely different cities, right? I joked with people all the time. You connect with people across the country to talk about Malcolm and Marie. You talk about all kinds of things about goofy TikTok things. So you can connect with people across the country for the ARE. It ain't that hard. So, we need to find ways to engage and support people. And then as a special word to again, the seasoned professionals, uh, we pull for each other because we tired of the young people getting licensed and looking at us funny. So no, I'm teasing, but no, there definitely is a way for people to and move forward. And now there are more avenues for us to do that. A lot of the avenues that were available now were not available even 10 years ago. And so there's ways for people to come back to taking to exam and moving forward in that capacity. And so I think that's something that will only afford us more opportunities just in the environment overall. I think Mustafa talked about it really well earlier about the capacity to move things as a society of licensed architects, and I think that's something that we fully embrace and something that we can definitely make a difference in the upcoming years.
Thank you guys for those answers. Really appreciate it. I just want to thank all the panelists for being here tonight. And I want to give the opportunity for any of our panelists to say one last word of advice before we close out this Thrive session.
Something just came to me actually, and it's just that I think you have to think about, yes, the exams right now and like getting licensed, getting done, but it is a stepping stone. It is not the final goal. It is like you get there, you move on. Like it is something that is far beyond just the tests. And so if you can make it through those, then I would still kind of think about your career after and what you want to do with it, i.e. like what communities you want to help, or why of the licensure, more so than like each exam and all of the sort of details of that. So it's a stepping stone.
I think we also talked a lot about the AREs and the test taking aspect of it, but I think definitely if you're in school trying to get your AXP hours, like I said before, I started recording mine during my second year. So right now I'm about 60% done with my AXP hours. So I think definitely if you haven't graduated yet or not in an IPIL program, that's something that you could work towards. And it's not as daunting as the exams, in my opinion. And also, if there's an AIS chapter at your school, then you can become a NCARB licensing advisor. And I think that was a great way for me to learn more about like the licensing process, because I had to sort of act as a resource for other students at my university. So it motivated me to sort of learn more about the licensing process before we got to our pro practice class. That was our 5th year of architecture school. So definitely look into becoming a student licensing advisor. NCARB has a conference every 2 years, and they'll like cover the costs of going to it too. So I've been to one in Chicago and then one in Minneapolis. So that's definitely a good resource and opportunity as well.
I guess one final kind of word of advice or motivation is I think surround yourself with people that you want to like keep up with. In a sense, I've been a part of study groups where where sessions are always canceled, or it's not consistent, or people drop off and they don't continue their exams for 3 to 6 months at a time. Whereas I've been a part of a study group where they're doing their sessions every week like clockwork. They are taking those exams. They're sharing their pass fails, and there's a difference. If you're around people who are aggressive and who are continuing to move forward, you're more likely to do the same and to try to keep up and be motivated that you can do this when you see people and how they're going through this whole thing. So I'd say, surround yourself with people who are taking the exam, whether it's, some of these Facebook groups or study groups, or if you just do it by yourself, but you just keep up with other people, find something that or people that keep you going, and you guys bounce off of each other and just support each other.
Yeah, that was kind of my way. I was very much a person who was like, I can focus a lot more when I'm by myself. I'm a huge extrovert, so when I'm around people, that's just a distraction. So being able to study by myself was really good. So find whatever works for you. Find your process. If you need to be around people, be around people. If you need to, distance-wise during COVID, please. But if you need to get on a virtual chat and talk to people, do that. If you need to be by yourself, be by yourself. And also use especially if you're at a firm, use the people there. Ask them questions. They've gone through this. They've gone through these exams, no matter what format they were in. They'll be able to answer some of your questions. They'll be able to, assist you if you're going through some study materials and you just don't understand and you can't find anybody else that can help you out. Use all of your resources, like the forums, other people taking your tests, and your firm as well. And make sure to, ask your firm for those study resources. Ask them for that money. Ask them for them to reimburse you for your exams, because like Antoine said, like it makes you a lot more valuable as an employee, and it helps the firm's bottom line as well.
I guess my final thoughts, there's a couple things. First of all, I want to thank NOMAS and AIS for having this. I think this has been a lot of fun and incredibly impactful, not only for the speakers, but ideally, hopefully for those that participated. I'm not gonna put this on all the speakers because I ain't talked to nobody, but I'll answer these questions later if y'all wanna, get them to us. I have thoughts about all of them, but we only paid for 80 minutes on this Zoom call, so we got to get off. No, I'm kidding. But no, I will definitely help address some of these questions. I think that they're all valid. One of the things I want to acknowledge is like Patricia is talking about she wants to be done by the next conference. At the NOMA conference, we celebrate newly people. If you get your license, we're going to shout you out. We're going to stand up there and do a big old hurrah like at the family reunion. It's just like that. So, we want to do 50 of y'all. And so we definitely want to do that. And it's a celebration. But also for all of us that are still taking them, please be encouraged. Some of us came to architecture differently. Some of us definitely came to architecture because they went to a great school and wanted to become licensed immediately. Some of us came to architecture because we wanted to, quote unquote, make a difference in our communities. And there are a number of ways that you can do that and still come back to becoming a licensed architect. And I want to encourage all of you that are working in, facilities management or working as developers or working as planners or, doing other things, but still want to become licensed to still do so. You're not alone, not on an island. Just a different group of people that are still trying to have that same goal. Just have a plan and let's stick to that plan, right? You've all heard the axiom, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so let's stick to that plan. Let's work together. Let's celebrate when you pass those exams. I look forward to seeing many of us in Detroit and celebrating with us, no matter 8 to 80, blonde, cripple, or crazy. Let's all get them licenses.
Yes, such a great way to wrap it up. Just thank you all so much for being here and for all of your advice. So many takeaways, so hard to sum it up. Just find your support group, find those resources. They are out there. I know so many were thrown into the chat, a lot of links. There are scholarships, there are study materials. I will take a second to plug the AIS Pass Scholarship to pay, if you are a graduate, to pay for your first ARE. So definitely check out our website and find that. But it's never too early to get started. You can start recording your hours as soon as you finish high school. Don't wait. Start doing it now. If you haven't started your NCARB record, go ahead and do that. I know there were so many questions in the chat that we were not able to answer. So make sure you check out NCARB's website, contact us at AIS or NOMAS, and we will try to get those answered for you. Also look out for at your school or in your community, your NCARB student licensing advisors or faculty advisors, or even at the state level, and they can answer a lot of those questions for you. But just thank you again so much to our panelists. I hope everyone is giving them a huge round of applause. We really appreciate your time and sharing your experiences, and especially thank you to NOMAS, to Leslie in Montreal for partnering with us on this webinar and for helping put it together. So this webinar was recorded and will be available on our website very soon. But thank you all for joining us and hope you have a really great night.